But, you know, slaves built this house. You can see that. And you know, particularly the room where we were worshipping and eating, that building, you see the very stones that were dug by hand and evened by hand. Those were the hands of slaves that made it. And I think there's a lot of peace. I mean, I get a very peaceful feeling from this place. I feel the ancestors have somehow made their peace with that very conflictual and difficult history. But what I wanted to highlight for you was the way that their descendants haven't made that peace. The first war in the Western Cape was in 1657, and it was over slavery. As you know, the Khoisan were here, but were very difficult to enslave because they knew the land, so they kept on running away. And so Jan van Riebeck wrote to the Dutch East India Company and said, I need more docile people. And then they started sending slaves from the east, from Java and Indonesia and all those places. And that is how Islam came to the Cape. It came here in 1657 with a boatload of slaves. And although many Muslims who came later came as political prisoners, the huge majority that came as slaves, and they lived on places like this, and they built these buildings and many of the roads that you walk on, and you know, much of the agriculture that feeds you today, all of that was done by slaves. And the indigenous Khoisan, two smallpox epidemics later also became enslaved, and so there was a lot of intermarriage. And so you see how there's, you know, some of the Muslims with curly hair, with darker skin, so slanty eyes, but there was a lot of intermarriage. And my own great-grandmother's mother was a slave, and she came from, we say she was Saint Helena, but of course Saint Helena was a slave port. There's only about 20,000 indigenous Saint Helenas, and from the way she looked, you know, she's got that classic, the straight hair and the very, very dark skin, so it's somewhere Micronesia side. And that makes me a very, very typical Cape Townian to have that slave ancestry in my blood. So, why am I saying all this? Because, you know, what defines slavery is you're not a person, you're a thing. And the law in the Western Cape quite literally defined women as property for the first 250 years of its existence. And it's a matter of historical record that it was only in, I think 1854, which is 20 years after this house was built, that anybody was actually convicted of raping a woman of color. Because up to that point, until 1848, you couldn't rape a woman of color because she was not a person. She did not fall under the law of people, she fell under the law of property. And under the law of property, there's no definition of rape. Now, why am I reminding us of this? Because, you know, without getting into the psychoanalytic, but